On June 26, 2025, 4 days after Monica Reza disappeared from a hiking trail in the Angeles National Forest, someone created a memorial page for her on Find a Grave. Memorial ID 284387277. Monica Jacinto Reza, born December 30th, 1964, died June 22nd, 2025. Death location, Angeles National Forest. Remains, green burial. The helicopters were still in the air when that was created. Now, there are two explanations for that. One is that someone who knew her was grief-stricken and did something premature and strange. That happens. The other explanation is something we're not going to get ahead of tonight. What we're going to say is that it's a data point, a time-stamped one, and it's the kind of thing that when you're looking at a pattern, you write down and you don't explain away. There are currently somewhere between 4 and 9 scientists, engineers, and researchers, depending on who's doing the counting and how loosely they're drawing the circle, who are dead or missing in a window that runs from mid-2025 to right now. Every list you will find lumps them together. Most lists don't tell you which cases have documented institutional connections to classified aerospace programs, which have suspects and apparent non-UAP motives, and which are being included because they worked somewhere near something sensitive once. We're going to do that sort tonight, because the pattern that survives that sort is tighter than what's being circulated, and it's more defensible. And the one thread that almost nobody is pulling, because it requires going through patent filings and federal contract databases instead of Twitter, is a chain that runs through a single classified material, a single Air Force laboratory, and 3 people who are now dead or missing. We're calling it the Mondaloy chain, and we're going to show you the receipts.
Welcome to the 14 Wins podcast, where we talk about high strangeness and the war for perception. I go by Bones, and with us, as always, is RamX.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Ram. I just want to start with something you said to me before we hit record, because I think it's the frame for this whole episode. You said the story being told about these missing scientists is real, but it's being told wrong. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, what I mean is that everyone that's covering the story is drawing a circle around 8 or 9 names and pointing at the circle and saying pattern. And I understand the impulse. You've got a general missing, you've got a rocket scientist missing, you got a plasma physicist murdered, you got a Caltech astrophysicist murdered, and it all lands in roughly the same 8-month window. That's not nothing. But a circle isn't an argument. A circle is just a drawing. If you want to make a real argument, you have to be able to say, here's how these people are connected, here's the documented link, here's the institutional chain you can trace. And when you do that work, when you actually go through those records, you find that some of these cases are genuinely connected in ways that have receipts, and some of them are being included because they fit the vibe.
Right. So you have to look at the differences, because those matter just as much.
The difference is everything, because if you lump the strong cases in with the weak ones, you give people an easy out. They pick off the weakest link, and suddenly the whole thing looks like noise. We're not going to do that. We're going to tell you which cases hold and which ones don't, and then we're going to tell you what the cases that hold actually have in common, which is not they worked in science. It's something much more specific.
All right, so let's just set it up. What are we actually looking at? The window, the names, the basic shape of it all?
So the window runs from June 2025 to February 2026. And I want to be precise about why that window matters, because it's not arbitrary. Trump's first public signaling on UAP declassification starts in late February 2026, which was his Truth Social post directing federal agencies to release records. But the pressure towards disclosure had been building institutionally since mid-2025. Congressional hearings, the NDAA, UAP provisions, the Oversight Task Force. So this cluster, if it is a cluster, falls entirely inside the period when the secrecy apparatus would have had the most reason to be activated. If activation is even something that's happening, we're not asserting it is. We're saying that the timing bracket is notable enough to name.
Right, the names. So walk us through who's actually on this list and how you're sorting them.
Okay, so I'm sorting them into tiers based on one question. Is there a documented, traceable connection to a classified aerospace or UAP adjacent program? It's not they worked at a prestigious institution or they had a clearance somewhere at some point. A documented traceable connection. Here's what survives that test. First, Monica Jacinto Reza, 60 years old, aerospace engineer, former technical fellow at Aerojet Rocketdyne, recently moved to JPL. She's the co-inventor of something called Mondaloy. Mondaloy is a nickel-based superalloy engineered specifically for oxygen-rich rocket engine environments. It's Air Force funded, and she vanished on June 22, 2025, on a trail she hiked regularly. She was 30 feet behind her companions. FLIR, dogs, helicopters, drones, all they found was a beanie and some lip balm. The dogs lost the scent trail all the way down in the mountain. She was declared dead 4 days later while helicopters were still in the air, and someone created a Find a Grave memorial the same day she was declared dead. They listed her remains as a green burial before she'd been found. And that page is still up. The person who created it has made their profile private.
Yeah, that little detail gets to me.
It should, because it's not a theory, it's a timestamp.
Right.
Okay, next we have William Neal McCaslin. He's a retired Major General, and he commanded the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson from 2011 to 2013. That's a $4.4 billion classified portfolio, which includes directed energy, hypersonic propulsion, advanced aerospace materials, classified satellite systems, and on top of that, he held the executive secretary role on the Special Access Program Oversight Committee. That's the body with legal visibility over every single compartmented program in the entire Department of Defense. Not one branch, all of them.
Yikes, yeah.
Which would definitely include UAP. And there has been a lot of anecdotal evidence as well as some documented evidence, i.e. government documents that mention Wright-Patterson as a heart of UAP studies. So McCaslin was there. I don't think too many people in the public right now are denying that he had access to UAP material and study. The question is, what happened to him, right? He walks out of his home in Albuquerque on February 27th. He leaves his phone, his glasses, and all of his wearables, like wearable tech, on a table. He takes his wallet, his boots, and a .38 revolver, and he's never seen again. His wife told the 9/11 dispatcher he planned not to be found. She said he'd changed his clothes before leaving, and he'd been experiencing what she described as mental fog, and he'd been stepping down from his advisory roles. All true, by the way. But his disappearance happened within days, and I mean days, of Trump's Truth Social post directing declassification.
Yeah. Yeah, and Congress responded to that, right?
Yeah. Congress held a classified SCIF briefing in March, specifically about McCaslin's disappearance and its relationship to UAP programs. The contents are still classified. Burchett has said McCaslin's name came up in a briefing, and Burleson requested FBI involvement and called the case deeply concerning. And then Burchett, this week, said publicly, "We will not have UFO disclosure. They don't want it out. I think it's too deep and too strong, and they're going to claim military intelligence, and they're going to say that it weakens our military," which apparently they all said to him, as well as he said that they tried to appeal to his Christian faith and said, hey, whatever this is, it's not, doesn't run along those lines. So they're playing it from every angle, both that it's a national defense issue and that it's a religious issue. They're seeing what works.
Right.
And Burchett is not a man speculating. Like, he was in a room and he's telling you what he heard.
Right, right. So those are the two strongest cases. What connects them together then?
Well, that's the part no one's really talking about, and it goes a layer deeper than the names. The connection between Reza and McCaslin, it's not just institutional proximity, it's programmatic. The Air Force Research Laboratory, under McCaslin's command, directly funded the research program under which Mondaloy was developed. Her mentor was a materials scientist named Dallas Hardwick, who worked under McCaslin at the Air Force Research Laboratory before dying of cancer in 2014. So you have the person who developed the foundational science, the person who scaled it into a usable aerospace material, and the general who ran the lab that funded and classified it.
Yeah.
And that chain, it gets broken at every link. The mentor is dead, the engineer is missing, the general is missing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I don't want to say it's amazing yet, but I'm just saying.
Right. Wise. Because every person who held the complete technical picture of how this specific propulsion material moves from a laboratory bench to the inside of an American rocket engine is now gone. And that's not a circle, that's a chain. And you can trace it through patent records and federal contract databases if you want to.
Right. So, that's the part that goes from, interesting coincidence to something that warrants an actual investigation.
Right, and I want to be careful here because this is where the process matters. We're not saying McCaslin was silenced. We're not saying Reza was taken. What we're saying is that the chain is severed. That's the anomaly. What severed it? Whether it's deliberate, whether it's coincidence, whether it's something else entirely. And that's what an investigation would determine. We're identifying the gap. We're not filling it yet.
Right. But there are other cases we haven't even mentioned yet. I mean, those three alone are amazing, but because there are more names floating around, and some of them don't hold up the same way.
Yeah, and that's where intellectual honesty matters. Two of the most prominent cases in the broader cluster have suspects, documented motives, and the connections to classified programs are either thin or non-existent. Nuno Loureiro, director of MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center, world-class plasma physicist, was murdered at his home in Brookline in December of 2025. The suspect is a Portuguese national who attended the same university program as Loureiro 25 years earlier. He also shot 2 people at Brown University 2 days before, and he was found dead by suicide. Yeah. The weapon was forensically matched, and the assessed motive is documented as academic fixation. Loureiro represented a version of success that the suspect never achieved. Now, fusion research absolutely has national security implications. Loureiro had DOE contracts, he had possible clearances, but the documented motive is personal. The suspect is identified, and the connection to UAP-adjacent classified program is just not really well established. Another name in the circle is Carl Gramer, Caltech astrophysicist, 30 years at the Infrared Processing and Analysis Center, Hubble and Spitzer missions, planetary defense asteroid work. He was shot on his front porch in Llano, California in February of 2026. The suspect is a 29-year-old local man who had trespassed on Grillmar's property carrying a rifle 2 months earlier. He was arrested and had the felony reduced. He was released on recognizance and returned and killed him.
Wow, yeah. So that detail about the felony being reduced.
Yeah, that's a real institutional failure. A man was found on a scientist's property with a rifle, was charged with a felony, and the judge chose to let him go on his own recognizance. And 2 months later, Romero's dead. That's not a UAP story, though, yet. That's a justice system failure story. And Caltech's official announcement described Gramer as having passed away with no reference to the homicide, which is consistent with the pattern of institutional minimization in all of these cases. But it still doesn't turn a local crime into a coordinated campaign or conspiracy yet. The judge is still alive and the suspect is known, so it's not like this case is on the surface anomalous. The pattern is strange. That all these people dying within this time is strange. The odds of that are almost negligible.
Right. So what do we do about those cases that don't exactly hold?
Well, I think we set them aside, not because nothing happened, like Loureiro and Gramer are both real tragedies, and they're both worth independent examination. But if we're asking whether there is a deliberate, targeted cluster of incidents connected to UAP program secrecy, the strongest argument for that runs through Reza and McCaslin and the Mondaloy chain. Those cases have the documented institutional connection. Those cases have the institutional silence as a consistent variable across the organizations involved. Those cases have the timing bracket, and that's where the argument lives.
Right, and then we have the Wright-Patterson thread on top of that.
Right, so in October of 2025, before Gramer, before McCaslin, 3 personnel at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base with top-secret clearances died in an incident captured on security cameras, and the assessed cause was murder-suicide. An Air Force acquisition manager, his wife, and a 25-year-old operations analysis officer. Wright-Patterson's response was to offer counseling services. There were no official investigative statements. There was no press release. And this is the most sensitive aerospace research installation in the United States. And the official response to 3 deaths of cleared personnel was counseling services.
Yeah.
That response tells you something about the institution, not necessarily about the incident, but it does tell us something about the institution. Could use maybe some sensitivity training.
Right. So what's the overall frame? Where do we put all this?
Yeah, I think the frame is what we've been building toward all season. Really, we have a secrecy apparatus that has held this information for 70 years. It developed specific mechanisms for doing that. Classification systems, compartmentalization, institutional silence as a default posture. Political management of the disclosure narrative, and those mechanisms don't turn off when a president posts on Truth Social. They respond.
Right.
The question this cluster raises is the question we can't answer yet because it requires an investigation we don't have the standing to conduct, which is whether what we're seeing is the apparatus responding to disclosure pressure in a way that removes witnesses, or whether it's coincidence and it's inside a compressed timeline that our pattern recognition is inflating into something it isn't. I mean, there's also the third possibility of the phenomenon and whatever influence it may have over events. All 3 are possible, but the data doesn't resolve it. What the data points to is that the question is serious enough to ask out loud. Clearly, with the evidence sorted and the receipts shown, that's what we're doing tonight.
That's right, and that's what we always do. But, okay, so after the break, we're going to go deeper on the Mondaloy chain and walk through what Mondaloy actually is and why it matters strategically. And then we're going to look at the institutional silence patterns as its own variable, because that's where something genuinely new is sitting in this data. So stay with us. All right, welcome back. Before the break, Ram was laying out the evidence and sorting it. Which cases hold, which don't, and why the ones that hold are connected by something more specific than proximity to sensitive work. So, Ram, let's go deeper on the Mondaloy itself, because I think a lot of people are hearing that word for the first time, including me, need to understand what it actually is before the significance of losing the people who built it really lands.
Yeah, right. So let's start with what it is, because it sounds obscure and it isn't. A superalloy is an engineered metal designed to maintain structural integrity under conditions that would destroy conventional materials, like extreme heat, extreme pressure, chemically aggressive environments. The aerospace industry runs on them. Your turbine blades, your combustion chambers, the components inside a rocket engine that are in direct contact with burning propellant. Those are like superalloy territory. Mondaloy specifically is a nickel-based superalloy. So the key design constraint is oxygen-rich combustion. Most rocket engines burn fuel and oxidizer in a ratio that keeps the environment from attacking the engine components. So some of the most powerful and efficient engines, the ones you want for like national security applications, for things that need to be fast and hard to intercept, they run oxygen-rich engines. So meaning the environment inside the engine is actively trying to destroy the engine.
Right.
Mondaloy is engineered to survive that. It's not a commercially available system or material. It was developed under Air Force funding, and it went into U.S. rocket systems. And that's the public record from the patent filings.
Okay. Yeah, and that's not a small thing, strategically.
It's a huge thing strategically. The ability to run oxygen-rich combustion at high performances, it's directly relevant to propulsion systems for things like hypersonic vehicles, which is a domain where the US, Russia, China, Iran, they're all in active competition right now, and where the materials science is one of the binding constraints on what's achievable. You'd have to have a material that can survive in this oxygen-rich, destructive environment. If you have a material that solves that problem at scale, that's not just an engineering achievement, it's a strategic asset. You can now make lots of hypersonic missiles. And so the Air Force Research Laboratory, McCaslin's laboratory, that was the institutional home for this kind of work.
So walk us through the chain, the actual documented chain of it all.
Okay, so the chain has 3 nodes, and you can trace each link through the public record. Node 1 is Dallas Hardwick. She's a materials scientist. She worked at AFRL. That's what we're going to call the Air Force Research Lab to save time. It's under McCaslin's command. He's the foundational figure in the Mondaloy development. And that's crystallography work. It's the basic science of why the alloy behaves the way it does at high temperatures and in an oxygen-rich environment. Hardwick dies of cancer in 2014. That's natural causes. There's nothing really anomalous about the fact that people die. But his death is relevant because it's when the first link in the knowledge chain went missing.
Okay.
Node 2 is Monica Reza. She trained under Hardwick's influence at AFRL, and he's her professional mentor in the advanced materials lineage. So she took the foundational science and scaled it. And the co-invention of Mondaloy is hers, documented in patents, Air Force contract records, and her professional biography. It's also their Aerojet Rocketdyne, where she held the technical fellow designation, and that's the highest individual contributor rank in an engineering organization. It's not a title you hold because you're adjacent to important work. That means you're the work. She then moved to JPL, and then she vanishes, June 22nd, 2025. Node 3 is McCaslin. He didn't invent the materials, and his role is more institutional. He ran the laboratory that funded classified material. He directed the programs that Hardwick and Reza worked under. He held visibility over where the materials went, what it went into, and what the downstream applications were. So as executive secretary of the SAP Oversight Committee, he would have had visibility over any special access program that used it. And he vanishes February 27th, 2026.
So what you're describing is, to step back, is that the scientist, the engineer, and the program officer are all gone.
Yeah, the scientist who built the foundation, the engineer who made it producible, and the general who knew what it went into and held classification authority over the programs that used it. The complete knowledge chain for this specific material, from bench science to operational application, is severed. And I want to be clear and precise. We're not asserting that it's intentional. We're asserting it's documentable. You can pull the Air Force Research Lab contracts. You can trace the funding lineage. The chain is real. Whether it was deliberately cut is the question that requires a little bit more investigation.
Right. I mean, is there any public information on what specifically, Mondaloy went into? Like what programs? I don't.
Yeah, that's kind of where
understand.
The public record ends. The patent describes the material properties in the general application domain, oxygen-rich environments, but the specific programs are classified, which is exactly what you'd expect. And that's actually important to the argument because it means the full scope of what was lost when Reza disappeared and McCaslin disappeared is not knowable from open sources. What we know is what they knew in general terms. We don't know everything they knew specifically, and that gap between what we can see and what we can't is structurally identical to every other gap we've been investigating this season.
Right. So the visible activity continues, but the emails don't.
Yeah, right, exactly. The patents exist, like the contracts exist. The institutional affiliations are documented. What's missing is the people who held the living knowledge, the tacit knowledge that doesn't live in a filing, and once that's gone, it's gone.
All right, so let's move on to what I think is actually the most underreported angle of this entire event or cluster, because most people are focusing on the individuals. You've been focused on how the institutions respond.
Yeah, and I think that's where the pattern becomes really compelling in a way that doesn't require speculation at all, because you can just read the statements or notice the absence of them. And the behavior pattern is consistent across organizations that have no reason to be coordinating with one another. So, let's go through it. Monica Reza disappears June 22nd, 2025. She'd recently joined JPL. JPL is federally funded research and development center managed by Caltech for NASA. It employs around 5,500 people. One of their new researchers, an aerospace engineer with a classified material co-invention to her name, vanishes while hiking, and the search goes on for weeks. JPL's official response? Nothing. NASA? Nothing.
Right.
Aerojet Rocketdyne, her employer of record for most of her career? Nothing. The AIAA, which is the professional body for aerospace engineers? Nothing. Space News had published a feature profile on her in 2017, and they didn't even cover her disappearance.
Boy, do they even have HR departments? What's going on? So not a single word from any of those organizations.
Yeah, not one. And then you go to Carl Grimmer. He's 30 years a Caltech researcher. The field of astronomy loses, and his colleagues said this explicitly. A figure whose knowledge is irreplaceable. He shot on his front porch in February of 2026. Caltech's official announcement: we are saddened to share that Carl has passed away. Passed away.
Wow.
No mention that he was shot. No mention of the homicide investigation. No mention of the suspect. The Los Angeles County Board supervisors honored him. Caltech said just passed away.
Yeah, I mean, that's a choice.
It's a deliberate institutional communication choice. Now, on its own, you could read into it as standard crisis communication. Avoid the details, protect the family, don't become part of the news cycle, right? That's a defensible instinct. But then you go to Wright-Patterson, October 25, 3 personnel with top secret clearances, Air Force Acquisition Manager, his wife, 25-year-old Operations Analysis Officer, died at the same facility, captured on security cameras, assessed as murder-suicide. Wright-Patterson's response? Counseling.
Right.
No investigative statement, no press release, no confirmation of who the individuals were beyond what local news said. The most sensitive aerospace research installation in the United States. The facility that has been the center of UAP crash retrieval speculation for 70 years has a murder-suicide involving cleared personnel, and the institutional response is to offer counsel.
Yeah, and then McCaslin disappears, and the Pentagon won't even return, a press inquiry.
Yeah, Pentagon Public Affairs referred CNN to a press contact, and they did not respond.
Yeah.
Wright-Patterson referred inquiries to the Pentagon. The FBI joins the search. Congress holds a classified briefing, and the institution most directly connected to the missing general, the institution he commanded, produces nothing.
Yeah, so, what do you do with that pattern? Because I can hear someone saying right now, institutions are bad at communicating, or just making excuses. Institutions they protect themselves, or this is just bureaucratic behavior.
Yeah, default state, right? That's a fair argument. Yeah, and I want to take it seriously. Standard crisis communications doctrine does push organizations toward minimal disclosure of everything.
Yeah.
Let law enforcement handle it, not creating additional news cycles. That's real. And in any individual case, you could apply that explanation and it would hold. But the problem here is consistency. It isn't one organization behaving badly in one situation. This is JPL, NASA, Aerojet Rocketdyne, the AIAA, Caltech, Wright-Patterson, and the Pentagon.
Yeah.
All producing the same minimal disclosure posture across different incidents, different organizational cultures, different chains of command in a window of 8 months. The minimum disclosure isn't the same statement. It's the same behavior. Produce nothing unless you have to. When you have to produce something, produce as little as possible.
Right. But that behavior pattern is itself data. So we got you.
Yeah, it's data about the institutions. It tells you something about what they think the cost of disclosure is, even if disclosure of basic facts about what happened to people who work for them. There's a cost to it. And when that institutional posture is consistent across organizations that aren't formally connected, or across incidents that authorities say are not connected, the consistency is worth examining, even if the explanation is mundane, because either these institutions are independently making the same calculation, or disclosure costs more than silence, or something about the nature of these cases is producing the same institutional reflex. That could very well be, right? Where there's smoke, there's fire. And maybe it's not the fire we think, but there's fire. And figuring out which of those is true is, again, it's the job of an investigation.
Yeah, and it's, the job, it's not our job to resolve it tonight, obviously.
Not tonight. Tonight, the job is to put the pattern on the table clearly, show where the receipts are, name the question with enough precision that it can actually be investigated. It's like we did with the gap in the record. Those are the types of gaps you can take into a court of law, by the way. And that's, right. And that's different from what most of the coverage is doing, which is naming the question in a way that makes it easy to dismiss.
Right. All right, so we have to always go back to the timing, because it's so important, because we want a timestamp on the bracket, the way you laid it out before we recorded,
Yeah, right. So the bracket, the time bracket. Reza disappears June 22nd, 2025. Wright-Patterson deaths happen October 2025. Lorero murdered December 15th, 2025. Grillmere murdered February 16th, 2026. McCaslin disappears February 27th, 2026. Trump's Truth Social post directing federal agencies to declassify UAP records was February 20th, 2026, 1 week before McCaslin and 11 days after Grillmere.
Yeah.
Now, as I've said, we're not asserting causation, and I mean that. The timing could be coincidence, but I want to put one more fact on the table, and it's the one I keep coming back to. The SCIF briefing Congress held in March 2026, the one where McCaslin's disappearance was discussed alongside UAP program connections. That briefing was classified. Its contents are not public. Members of Congress were briefed on the connection between a missing general and UAP programs, and what they heard is still locked behind classification. Burchett came out of that process and said, "We will not have disclosure. Too deep, too strong." He's not speculating about whether the phenomenon is real. He's not talking about little green men. He's describing the apparatus, and the apparatus is the same apparatus that produced the institutional silence we've been talking about. It's the most consistent variable across everything we've examined tonight.
That is wild stuff. We're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we'll talk about what this means for where disclosure actually stands. We'll talk about the McCaslin disappearance as its own thing, and what we think the next move has to be for the people who have the standing to investigate this properly. Welcome back to 14 Wins. We've laid out the chain, we've laid out the institutional silence pattern, and now I want to get to the thing that I think is, sitting underneath all of it, which is what the McCaslin case specifically tells us about where disclosure actually stands right now. Because, Ram, when you strip away all the UFO lore around, Wright-Patterson, all the Roswell mythology, all that, and you just look at who this man actually was and what he actually did, the disappearance is strange on its own terms.
It is, and I do want to do exactly that. Strip the lore away, because the lore is actually obscuring the stronger argument. People hear Wright-Patterson and they immediately go to alien bodies in a hangar. And look, we've talked
Right.
about crash retrieval programs at length here, and we think the evidence for the existence of those programs is very real. But the reason McCaslin's disappearance matters is not primarily like the Roswell connection. It's the SAP Oversight Committee role. So let's establish what that actually was. The Special Access Program Oversight Committee is the body with legal visibility over every compartmented program in the Department of Defense. It's not one branch, it's not one service, it's all of them. The executive secretary of that committee has a cross-cutting view of classified programs that almost no one in the government holds. That's not a position you get because you ran an interesting research lab. It's a position that requires extraordinary institutional trust, and it gives you the holder extraordinary institutional knowledge.
Yep.
When a man who holds that position walks out of his house and disappears 11 days after a presidential declassification order, that is a national security question regardless of what you believe about UAP. The classified SCIF briefing Congress held confirms that people with oversight responsibility took it as seriously as all that.
Yeah, so let's go through what the record actually shows on the day he disappeared, because the 911 call details are important. I don't think people are really caught up with that.
Right. So the confirmed timeline, February 27th, 2026. McCaslin's wife leaves the house, and during that window, which is approximately 1 hour, she's going to the doctor. McCaslin meets with a hired repairman. And the repairman is the last one to confirm seeing McCaslin. After the repairman leaves, McCaslin is gone. When he left, he leaves his phone, his prescription glasses, his wearable devices, his Fitbit, etc., all the things that connect you to your life and other people and allow people to find you. Even his wife said he just didn't want to be tracked. What he takes is his wallet, his hiking boots, a red backpack, and a .38 caliber revolver with a leather holster. His wife's 911 call was released April 3rd, so it's just over a week ago, and she tells dispatchers he planned not to be found. She notes he changed his clothes before leaving, not unusual clothes, different clothes. He just made a deliberate decision about what to wear before he walked out. And that detail, right?
That's that detail, it lands differently every time I hear it.
Because it's specific. Changing the clothes before you disappeared is considered an act. It's not the behavior of someone in acute psychiatric crisis who just walks out of the door. It's someone who thought about what they were doing. It's deliberate and then did it. His wife also told dispatchers he'd been experiencing mental fog, that it had been frustrating him, and that he'd been stepping down from his advisory roles because of it. She said he was seeing a doctor for anxiety, short-term memory loss, and lack of sleep.
Yeah, which, the internet immediately ran with as evidence of something,
Yeah, and I want to be careful here because there are two readings of that symptom cluster, and both are possible. Reading 1, a 68-year-old man with a complex medical history is experiencing cognitive decline. He becomes distressed about it, and he makes a decision to disappear rather than face what's coming next. That happens. It's tragic. It's real, and there's nothing anomalous about it except the timing. His wife's 9/11 supports this reading. There was also some reports from his colleagues that he was behaving differently, maybe was giving them some indication that something was coming too.
Right.
Reading 2, those symptoms, mental fog, anxiety, memory disruption, sleep disruption, they're consistent with the documented neurological effects of UAP close encounters. We've covered this. The UAP affects literature like the Havana Syndrome parallel, the pattern of people who worked in proximity to these programs reporting specific symptoms. That's not a casual observation. There's a body of documented evidence to support it.
Right, and you just can't tell from the outside which reading is right.
You can't, and that's really the point. The honest position is that both are possible. The evidence doesn't really resolve it, and the resolution requires an investigation with access to his medical records, his recent contacts, and the classified programs he had visibility over, none of which is available in open sources. What we can say is that the symptom cluster is noted, the timing is noted, and the combination of those two things is what triggered a classified congressional briefing. Congress found it serious enough to discuss behind closed doors. That's in the record.
Right. There's something else about McCaslin that I don't think gets enough attention, which is, the Tom DeLonge emails, because that's not speculation. That's a primary source.
Yeah, it's a WikiLeaks document. The 2016 release of John Podesta's emails included messages from Tom
Yeah.
DeLonge, who at that point was actively building what became To the Stars Academy. And in those emails, DeLonge describes McCaslin by name. He writes that McCaslin commanded the exact laboratory at Wright-Patterson that received material from Roswell. He writes that McCaslin helped assemble his advisory team, and he writes that McCaslin, in his words, very, very aware of classified material related to non-human intelligence.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Now, DeLonge is not a primary source on what McCaslin knows. DeLonge is a primary source on what DeLonge believed and what DeLonge was told. Those are different things. But McCaslin's wife acknowledges in her Facebook statement that her husband had a brief association with the UFO community. And he worked with DeLonge as an unpaid consultant on military and technical matters. But she confirms the association, so DeLonge emails aren't fabricated contacts. They're a documented connection between McCaslin and the active UAP disclosure efforts, confirmed by his own wife at whatever depth it ran.
Right. I mean, that matters when you're trying to understand why Congress held a classified briefing about a missing person.
Missing general who commanded
Right.
the laboratory most associated with crash retrieval programs. It held cross-cutting SAP oversight authority, who was named in primary source documents as a participant in UAP disclosure efforts. He disappeared days after a presidential declassification order. That's the complete picture. And any one of those factors alone might not trigger a classified congressional response. But all of them together did. They did.
Right. So I mean, where does this leave disclosure? Because we've been watching this cycle for years now. I mean, the last episode we called it, political blue balling, followed by institutional control. I mean, this week, you got Burchett said it out loud. I mean, what do you make of where things actually stand? Because according to him, it's too deep and too strong.
So Burchett's statement is the most direct public articulation of the institutional resistance mechanism that I've heard from someone who's actually been in the briefing rooms. He said, we will not have UFO disclosure. They don't want it out. Too deep, too strong. They'll claim military intelligence, that it weakens the military, and then he said, I'm going to keep fighting anyway. And they also appeal to his Christian beliefs. That last part matters. He's not throwing up his hands, though. He's saying, I'm going to keep fighting anyway. He's describing the obstacle clearly so that people understand what it really is. And he's saying that the obstacle, as he describes it, it's not ignorance. That it's not that they don't know or anything. It's that there's no inertia behind it. There's no institutional will. There's not enough political will from the public to force it. So, active, organized, resource, institutional will defeat a niche minority movement within the public. Pattern we're describing tonight, though, the Mondaloy chain, the institutional silence, the timing bracket, the classified briefing, all of that is consistent with what an apparatus operating under that institutional will would produce, not necessarily through active malice. Bureaucratic systems tend to maintain themselves. Classification systems have their own gravity. People who've spent years inside the apparatus have powerful incentives to keep the apparatus intact. You don't need a conspiracy, right? You need a system doing what systems do, maintaining themselves.
Right, but the system is under more pressure right now than it's been in a long time.
Genuinely more pressure. And I've been skeptical about these disclosure cycles before. We've watched this movie a bunch of times, but the pressure this time does have a different character. You have Luna pushing hard from the oversight side with specific deliverables like videos. You have Burchett being the most direct he's been in public. You have the NAAA provisions that are structural. That's not just rhetorical. And you have a Bank of England senior analyst writing to the governor warning of ontological shock and financial system implications. And he's not just a random UFO enthusiast.
Right.
He's saying there's a financial risk, a professional financial risk. And that is close enough to real that institutions need to prepare. And you have a classified briefing about a missing general that Congress took seriously enough to hold in a SCIF. Whatever was in that room, it moved people who have seen a lot of classified material.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I keep coming back to. We've been doing the show for a while now, and I've watched a lot of disclosure moments come and go. This one feels a little different, not because of the promises that everyone's making. It's more of it's just the behavior, the overall behavior. The institutional behavior is different. The silence is louder. The specific details of what's missing and who's missing are more precise. I don't know. I mean, and the people who are closest to it are saying things they haven't said before. So things are moving.
Yeah, Burchett's statement is new. The language is new. Too deep. Too strong. That's someone who went into a classified briefing and came out changed. It's not a talking point, It's a man processing something. And when you put that next to the Mondaloy chain and next to the Find a Grave memorial created while helicopters were still in the air, next to a general who changed his clothes and walked out into the desert 11 days after a declassification order, the weight of it is different from the usual cycle. We're not saying disclosure is coming. We're not saying these things are definitively connected. What we're saying is that the cluster is real. The chain is documentable. The institutional behavior is consistent in a way that warrants examination, and the people with the standing to investigate it, Congress, the FBI, journalists with FOIA capacity, they need to stay on this, not because we've solved it, because we haven't. And the gap between what's visible and what's missing is what the real question here is.
Yeah, that's where we always end up. It's the gap.
Yeah, the gap's the point. You don't understand the phenomenon by filling it in with what you want to be there. You understand it by mapping its edges precisely, and then doing the work to close it. The Epstein email gap, the missing scientist, the classified SCIF. Everything we've investigated on this show lives in that space between what the record shows and what the record stops showing. It's not a mystery about aliens. That's a mystery about power and what it protects. And those mysteries have answers. They're just locked behind the same apparatus that Burchett is describing.
Right. So what do we actually need? Like, what's the next move that would matter?
Right. So I think we need three things. First, someone with congressional subpoena authority needs to pull McCaslin's recent contacts, his medical records, if the family consents. And most importantly, the specific SAP programs he had visibility over in the last 2 years of his advisory work. Not to prosecute anyone, to establish whether the knowledge change we've described is connected to active programs that would create a motive for someone to want that chain severed. Second, the Reza case needs investigative resources proportional to who she was. She was not a casual hiker who got lost. She was a co-inventor of a classified-grade propulsion material who vanished without a trace from a trail she knew well, 30 feet behind a companion in a window of minutes. The LA County Sheriff's Homicide Bureau has the case. It shouldn't be sitting quietly. Third, the institutional silence pattern needs to be named publicly and formally. Every organization that issued no statement, JPL, NASA, Aerojet Rocketdyne, AIAA, should be asked directly why, not aggressively, on the record. Because the answer to that question, whatever it is, that's information. That's the real answer.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you have standing to investigate, you know who you are. I mean, the record is cleaner than the noise around it suggests. I mean, like we just stated, the chain is real, the gap is real, but right now you have people who should be asking the questions, they're moving too slowly on it, and then the people who don't have standing are moving too fast and filling the gap with things that aren't there. So, there's always a noise problem. And then we're trying to stay in the middle, of course, of all that, and it's harder than it sounds.
Yeah. It's the only place worth standing.
Yeah, and this is a kind of a dark topic, but at least we're not talking about the end times.
Yeah.
Or Armageddon.
We got to stay away from the war. We got to stay away from the political situations. We got to stay away from all of it this week.
I mean, we're not also going into a deep discussion on how Chris Bledsoe invested in a telephoto lens, which I thought was kind of interesting, some of the things he's posting about the orbs.
Yeah, some of those videos look like they could be legit, and they look like it was something that was plasma that was giving off the appearance of being plasma jelly, and then it was shifting into something more structural. So I hope those videos are real and that they can get verified and we get more information that way. That'd be great. But it was interesting. And then on the Epstein front, it was like, well, you started a war to try to get away from the Epstein files. And Melania said on day one of potential peace talks, hey, let's have a press conference, right? So,
that's right. She brings it up.
I think those will be coming right back.
Right.
And that press conference was basically like if we were having a meeting about accounting software, and we were specifically talking about like the UX database. And Melania was in the room, and she said, guys, I just want to ask why everyone is saying that I lick food in the break room.
Right.
No one's running for a sandwich after that, you know.
Right. Strange times. Hey, that's 14 wins. Thank you for being here, everyone. All your likes and shares and ratings generally help us. And we said it before, and we'll keep saying it. We're not getting the algorithm help that some people get. And, if this was useful, share it with someone who needs it. And we'll be back. But until then, stay with the evidence, even when the evidence is absent.
Hey, great point and good discussion. And thanks for listening, y'all. Look forward to the next one.
When the damn data meets the power elite, blackmail networks and the incomplete, 40 and wins parsing what the mainstream won't see. Government controller just hot strangers in the VIP. Let's get dark. 40 and wins blowing through the server racks, files redacted, secrets in the zipper pack.